Today's lesson is about Gantt charts. Gantt charts are basically a method of scheduling that's going to allow us to keep track of our tasks, know who's responsible for what, and also to keep a real close eye on completion times. So Gantt charts is a key element in scheduling. What is scheduling? Well, scheduling is a way of keeping tasks on track using a process resource of time as the guideline. So you want to know when actions should occur, so you'll be able to read that right off your Gantt chart. You'll be able to know how long a process should take to complete. That's obviously critical. And we want to know who is responsible for that task to complete it. An example would be, say you're on a automobile assembly line. If you didn't have really good scheduling, what would happen if, say, the tires were scheduled to be put together backwards? Obviously, that wouldn't work out. What about if one process gets done in half the time of the other? Well, then maybe you want to speed up the original process so it finishes around the same time, or maybe pull some resources away from the task that's getting done too soon, and so that way everything gets done and completed right around the same time. Also, you want to know what happens if the person who normally does the job becomes sick. Someone else needs to fill in. So you want to have a good way of being able to keep track of all these tasks and know who does what. So first thing I want to ask is, has anyone ever heard of a Gantt chart? Do you know what a Gantt chart is? Have you ever used one? And if you've used a Gantt chart, how did you use it to carry out your projects? Now, we've all had some experiences working in a group. Could be small stuff, could be big stuff, maybe small classroom activities, maybe extracurricular activities. But we've all worked in a group at some point in our lives. So I want you to take a moment and just kind of reflect on how did that work for you, working as a group. And think about for a moment, was it easy to split up tasks for the project? So if you had a project that was complex, something that had to get done, how difficult or easy was it to split those tasks? So if it was something like, hey, we're going to throw a party, that's kind of easy to think about. All right, who's going to bring the chips? Who's going to bring some barbecue? But it really helps to kind of plan out to make sure that you have a nice, even distribution of different tasks so they all get done properly and on time before your party. One of the key elements, probably one of the most common dynamics in working in a group, is things just don't end on time. So that's the real strength of a Gantt chart, is you'll know very early on if your project's going to end on time or not, or at least if you're on the right track. And was it easy to coordinate the tasks? So was it pretty easy to easily identify everybody who had a task and if they were doing their tasks, if their tasks were on track or not? And then was it easy to express the task and deadlines? So was it clear that everything was going to get done when they were supposed to get done? For example, let's say you're going to have a barbecue, so one person's task is to barbecue, but another person's task is to fill up the propane for the barbecue. So obviously, if person who's supposed to fill up the propane doesn't get his task done by the time the barbecue is supposed to begin, then it's the person who's actually supposed to be doing the cooking isn't going to be able to do the cooking. So it's critical that you're able to identify who does what and that the tasks are ordered properly. And then when you think about your project that you were on, any techniques used to help make the project flow smoothly. So think about some of the things that you did. So just take a moment to kind of pause this video, think about a project that you did, and think about stuff that worked, what didn't work, and was there a better way. All right, so today, like I said earlier, we're going to go through the history of a Gantt chart. Just to give you a little brief history about it, it was created by Lawrence Gantt. He was a mechanical engineer and management consultant, and he wanted to set up a visual tool for scheduling actual time on projects. So amazingly, this had never been done before, and he came up with a really clever charting tool. It's probably one of the most common project management resources out there. It is accepted and commonplace today, and a couple of the sort of key projects that really encompassed Gantt charts was the Hoover Dam and building of the interstate highway system. So two giant monumental construction projects, all managed utilizing a Gantt chart. Gantt charts are used in design and engineering projects, construction projects, manufacturing projects, transportation projects, and even event organizations. So basically anything where you've got multiple tasks that need to be completed by a certain time frame, a Gantt chart is a perfect solution for organizing and charting all of that. And we'll certainly be using this in our class projects, both in this assignment that we're doing today as well as our final projects. So here's a kind of brief example of what a Gantt chart looks like. You can see we have a column on the far left that has our tasks, and then our time is along the right. So this is kind of done by week. So we begin February 19th, and then the following week is the 22nd. So that's our first month of February. Then we have 3 weeks there in March, 3 weeks in April, and then 1 week there represented in May. And then our first task here is assign teams. So you can see that spans about 2 weeks. And then there's the project underneath it here, select reserve engineer. And that's going to begin while the first project is, or the first task is still going on. So these tasks here, all these 3 tasks are going to be happening in parallel while simultaneously going on here. So that's kind of the brief overview of how a Gantt chart is laid out. Everything graphically represents the duration of tasks, so I can easily look and see, this is a shorter task compared to the others. This is a much longer task, writing the final report. And I can also see how things are going to sort of increment along the way. So really quick, easy to interpret and understand graphical representation of everything that needs to get done. And then also what's nice about a Gantt chart is it monitors the progress of the entire project. So we'll get into that in a moment, but we'll actually start filling in these bar charts here as our project progresses. So say we're only 50% done with this project, then we would just have 50% of it dark and then the other 50% white. So a very easy way to identify how much of a project is done as well. So a few advantages of a Gantt chart. Obviously easy for planning and scheduling. You can access how long a project should take. It lays out the order in which tasks need to be completed, and it helps manage the dependent variables of a project. When monitoring a project, you're able to see what should be done at any point in time. It also shows you the different actions that could bring a project back on track. So you can easily look, see what you're not on track on, allocate more resources to get that done, and bring your project back on time. A few disadvantages of a Gantt chart. It can get more confusing as you get more and more items on your Gantt chart. These are paper Gantt charts. What we're actually going to be using for our final projects are computerized Gantt charts, which are still can be a little cumbersome if you have a tremendous amount of tasks, but at least we can group our tasks together, and then it'll also take tasks off our Gantt chart as they're being completed, so as not minimize your clutter. Another thing is it doesn't really represent the size of a project or relative size of tasks. So if there's certain tasks that take a tremendous amount of effort, even though you have it based by time, you don't really have any idea of how much effort or financial resources or other things that a task might require. All it really does is measure your progress as well as the time of each task. So here a very basic Gantt chart. This dotted line would specify that this would be our current date, so this would be like the day today. And then we can see here we're about halfway through this project. Now we start off with our main project, Project XYZ, and then underneath that we have subtasks. So Project XYZ, our first sort of subtask of this is research, then development, then prototype production. So you can see that these are a bit staggered. They'll all be going in parallel, but we'll begin by research, continue research as development is going on, and then as about partially through development here, we begin our prototype production. And once our prototype production is done, we can see that our entire task, our entire project here is complete. So this top bar here, Project XYZ, is encompasses all of these three subtasks. little bit more advanced Gantt chart here. This shows a task as well as the overall completion. So we can see here project XYZ was to start on January and go all the way through October. It is currently June, so we can see a line goes here, June. And we can see that the colored bar actually goes a bit past June. So in this scenario, we can actually see that we're a bit ahead of schedule in that we have completed the prototype production is much further along than initially anticipated that we'd be at this point. So we're ahead of task there. Our development is right on task, and our research is also on schedule as well, being that it has already been completed. So again, very easy way to look at a Gantt chart and recognize each task and how much of it has been done and still needs to complete, and get a good sense on whether you are on track to completing your project on time or not. So we talked briefly about parallel and sequential activities. So sequential are activities that need to be done in a specific order. So going back to my party scenario, we can't begin barbecuing until the propane tanks have been filled. So that task of barbecuing is dependent on the task of propane tanks being filled. Another example would be something that must be designed before you build. These are also called linear tasks. So things that have to be done in order, in sequence, one by one, can be either sequential or linear tasks. Next example are parallel tasks. So parallel tasks are not dependent on each other. They can be done simultaneously. One does not affect the other. So maybe one person's buying chips, one person's buying a cake. Both of those two people can go out and do those tasks independently. One does not have to be done before the other. Parallel can also be done pretty much at any stage of a project. So we can buy chips at the very beginning, or we can buy chips right before the party. If our project is prepare for the party, then the conclusion of our project is the moment the party begins. So buying chips can be done at any point of that. All right, so steps to create a Gantt chart. It's a good idea to kind of start with just a little bit of thinking about your project and a little bit of planning. This is a little bit easier to do on a computer. You can actually kind of start building your Gantt chart because it is going to sort of dynamically fill it in for you. But for today, we're just going to kind of do more of a traditional handwritten Gantt chart. So you want to start by writing up a list of all of your activities. Then you'll want to, on your piece of paper, write the timeline through the task completion. So your task will be beginning today, or if you've already got it started, you can begin with your beginning date, and then have your timeline go all the way through to when your task is going to be completed. So then we'll plot our tasks on either a graph paper, or if we have like a pre-made Gantt template, you'll start writing your tasks on the piece of paper, so that each task will go in a column along your left-hand side. And keep in mind of your sort of primary tasks and then subtasks. So it's much easier if you kind of group all of your tasks together. And if you have any sequential tasks, the tasks that you need to do first should go on the top and be listed sequentially on your Gantt chart. And then next thing will be to schedule all of your activities or tasks. So go through and start marking down your begin dates and end dates of each of those tasks. And then just monitor the progress of your project. So as things go along, you'll be shading in your graph based on how percentage-wise of your task is complete. So you'll want to note your earliest start date. You want to know your estimated length of time it'll take to complete each activity. You want to note whether your activity can be done sequentially or in parallel with other activities. And here's just a little sample of that. So we have our tasks. I've got 5 tasks written here. I've got the possible start date of each task. I have the length of time that each task will take. and the type of task, and then if the task is dependent on something, so all of our tasks here that are dependent on something finishing, I've just noted what that task is. So task number 2 is parallel on task number 1 completing. So I got number 1 before I could do number 2, and then number 3 can't begin until number 2 is done. Number 4 can begin until number 1 is done, and then number 5 can't begin until 4 is done. So I'll take all that and begin charting that down on my paper. And what you want to do is think about your task and get an idea of what your time frame should be. So if it's something you're just doing today, then maybe you want to have each column on your Gantt chart be minutes or half hour or hour. You can break it up any way you want. If it's a much longer term task, say you're planning out your college career, 4 years, maybe you'll have it broken up in semesters. If you're doing your whole life plan, maybe you want to have it broken up in years or even decades. So there's a number of different ways that we can set this out, and that's really just going to depend on your start and end time of each task. So here's an example of my tasks here that I've put together. That's all pretty recommended there. So then you'll put each task, generate the bar. It's going to specify the length of each task. And then begin scheduling your activities. So notice that activities that are sequential have to be carried out required in sequence. And then when possible, you want to schedule parallel tasks. They do not interfere with sequential sequences. And you want to allow some time for holdups, overruns. So obviously, tasks can always get hung up with unexpected situations. So it's nice to kind of plan for that, give yourself a little buffer of time when needed. So I've mapped all that out. All right, so now what I want you to do is we're just going to kind of check understanding here. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions based on this chart right here. So let me pull up the chart. All right, so the assignment for this Gantt chart is I want you to put together a simple Gantt chart with the task of brushing your teeth. So I just want you to note all of the items that you need to do in brushing your teeth and put that down as a task and note which order each thing has to be done in and the amount of time it needs to be taken. And you can set up your Gantt chart in increments of minutes, depending on how long it takes you to prep and brush your teeth. For this assignment, even though it says here to do it in Word or PowerPoint, I'm just going to hand out sheets of paper that'll also be attached to this assignment if you need to print it up. So I just want you to print up that piece of paper and then write on that Gantt chart the steps of brushing your teeth. All right, so you want to start by identifying the needs of your to brush your teeth, the materials that you'll need, equipment, labor involved, and then the process to complete your objective of getting your teeth cleaned, of course. And then it sounds like a lot of systems model, but plug in your information where it most likely should be used, and then start charting on your Gantt chart. And I know this is asking a lot for a flow chart, but we're not going to work on that today. So I'm just looking for a Gantt chart of brushing your teeth.